Elena Vasquez pressed her face against the cold metal bars of her cell. The view from Kepler Station showed Earth hanging in the distance like a dying blue marble. 20 years had passed since humanity lost its freedom, and the planet still looked beautiful from space. But Elena knew the truth that hid beneath those swirling clouds. The guard walked past her cell without looking. He was HFY, one of the insect creatures that served as the consortium's enforcers. His forearms moved in perfect rhythm, and his compound eyes saw everything. Elena had learned to hate that clicking sound their feet made on metal floors. She remembered when the first aliens came to Earth. The humans had been so excited. First contact with intelligent life from the stars. The news channels ran stories for months about humanity joining a great galactic community. Politicians made speeches about a bright future among the stars. The Zephyrians came first. They looked almost human, except for their silver skin and completely black eyes. They offered Earth clean energy technology that could solve climate change forever. All they wanted in return was a small trade agreement. Nothing too big, they said. Just some mining rights on the moon and a few space stations. Elena had been a young military officer then. She remembered watching the massive Zephyrian ships landing in major cities around the world. The technology they brought changed everything overnight. No more oil, no more coal, no more pollution. Earth's skies cleared for the first time in decades. But the energy systems came with a catch. They needed special fuel that only the Zephyrians could provide. And the technology was so complex that humans couldn't understand how it worked, let alone copy it. Within 5 years, Earth completely depended on Zephyrian energy. Then came the Tellurians. These creatures looked like walking trees with too many branches for arms. They controlled the trade routes between star systems, they said. Earth wanted to trade with other worlds, didn't it? Of course, there were fees for using the hyperspace lanes, standard rates for all new species. The fees started small but grew larger each year. Earth's economy slowly shifted to serve galactic trade rather than its own people. Humans began working in factories that made goods for alien worlds. They grew food that fed alien colonies. Earth's resources flowed outward while very little flowed back. Elena closed her eyes and remembered the day everything changed. She had been Commander Elena Vasquez of the Earth Defense Force then. The EDF was supposed to protect humanity from threats. But what do you do when the threat comes disguised as friendship? The crisis started when a group of human colonies tried to declare independence from the consortium's trade agreements. They were small settlements on distant worlds, barely a few thousand people each. They said they wanted to govern themselves and trade freely with whoever they chose. The consortium's response was swift. Economic sanctions hit Earth within hours. The Zephyrians cut power to entire continents. The Tellurians blocked all trade, routes to human space. Food shortages began almost immediately as Earth could no longer import what it needed to feed its population. Then came the HFY swarms. Elena shuddered as she remembered her first sight of them. Millions of insect creatures pouring from massive hive ships. Each one stood 7 feet tall with razor-sharp claws and armor plating that could stop bullets. They moved as one mind, never hesitating, never showing mercy. The HFY didn't come to destroy Earth. They came to enforce order. The consortium sent them to make sure humans understood their place in the galactic community. They landed in every major city and took control of all government buildings. Any human who resisted disappeared into their hive ships. Elena had led the defense of Geneva. Her forces held out for 3 days against the swarm before running out of ammunition. She watched her soldiers fall one by one to creatures that felt no fear and showed no emotion. The HFY took her alive, along with thousands of other military officers. That was the day Earth officially surrendered. The consortium was generous in victory, they said. Humans could keep their planet and their lives. All they had to do was follow consortium law and fulfill their obligations to the galactic community. Earth became a protectorate, which meant it was owned by the consortium but allowed to govern itself in small matters. But Elena knew the truth. Earth had become a slave world. Humans now worked in factories owned by alien corporations. They mined resources that shipped off-world to feed the consortium's endless appetite. Children learned alien languages before their own. Earth's military was disbanded, its weapons destroyed, its soldiers imprisoned or forced into labor. The worst part was how some humans welcomed it. They said the consortium brought peace and prosperity. They pointed to the clean energy and advanced medicine. They ignored the fact that every major decision about Earth's future was made by aliens in distant star systems. Elena heard footsteps approaching her cell, different from the Vex-High clicking. These were human footsteps, trying to be quiet. She turned to see Dr. Sarah Chen, one of the few human scientists still allowed to work on the station. Sarah looked around nervously before speaking in a whisper. Elena, I have news. From the Deep Space Monitoring Array. Elena moved closer to the bars. Sarah worked on communication systems, monitoring signals from across the galaxy. She sometimes brought Elena information about what was happening in the outside universe. What is it? Elena asked. I've been picking up strange signals, ships going missing in the outer systems, consortium patrols finding empty stations with no sign of what happened to the crews. Sarah's voice shook slightly. And there's something else. Yesterday I intercepted a message on an old Earth Defense Force frequency. Elena's heart skipped a beat. The EDF had been destroyed 20 years ago. All its codes and frequencies should have been dead for decades. Sarah pulled a small device from her pocket and held it near the bars. A voice crackled through the speaker, faint but clear. The exile returns, the judgment begins. Elena stared at the device. She knew that voice even after 20 years. It belonged to Marcus Chen, Sarah's brother and Elena's former second-in-command. Marcus had been aboard the last ship to leave Earth before the surrender, the Prometheus, carrying 10,000 humans into the unknown. Everyone assumed the Prometheus had been destroyed. The consortium claimed their sensors tracked it being torn apart by a black hole. But Elena had always wondered. Marcus was too smart and too stubborn to die easily. Sarah took back the device and hurried away. Elena returned to staring out at Earth, but now her mind raced with possibilities. If Marcus was alive, if the Prometheus had survived, what had they been doing for 20 years? She thought about the missing ships Sarah mentioned. Consortium, vessels disappearing without a trace. Empty stations with no sign of their crews. It could be pirates or equipment failures. But it could be something else. It could be revenge. Elena smiled for the first time in years. The consortium had taught humanity that the strong ruled the weak. They had shown humans what happened to species that couldn't defend themselves, but they had made one critical mistake. They had let some humans escape. And humans, Elena knew, were very good at learning from their mistakes. They were also very good at holding grudges. The stars looked different now as she gazed through her cell window. Somewhere out there in the darkness, humanity might still be free. And if they were free, Elena was certain of one thing. They would be coming home. Admiral Crick stood on the bridge of his flagship, studying the reports that troubled his sleep. The Zephyrian commander's silver skin had taken on a darker shade, a sign of stress that his crew pretended not to notice. In the past 6 months, 12 consortium ships had vanished without sending distress signals. Show me the Meridian sector again, Crix ordered. The holographic display flickered to life, showing a three-dimensional map of space. Red dots marked where ships had disappeared. The pattern looked random at first glance, but Crix had spent 40 years in the consortium navy. Random was rarely truly random. His communications officer, a young Zephyrian named Vix, approached with another report. Sir, the mining station at Kepler 442 has gone silent. They missed their scheduled check-in 12 hours ago. Crix felt his stomach tighten. Kepler 442 was deep in consortium space, surrounded by patrol routes and defense stations. Nothing should be able to reach it undetected. Dispatch the nearest patrol to investigate, Crix ordered, and increase alert status across all sectors. Meanwhile, in the Thalorian capital system, High Counselor Zekthar reviewed similar reports with growing irritation. The tree-like alien's branches rustled as he moved, a sign of agitation that his assistants knew to fear. Pirates, Zekthar declared to his staff. These disappearances are the work of criminals preying on isolated vessels. His chief of intelligence, a younger Thalorian named Veltar, dared to disagree. Counselor, pirates would leave debris. They would take cargo and leave evidence of their attacks. These ships simply vanish. No wreckage, no survivors, no ransom demands. Zekthar's branches stiffened. Are you suggesting something else? Some invisible enemy that strikes without trace? I'm suggesting we don't understand what we're facing, Veltar replied carefully. The Vexi had their own problems. In the depths of their primary hive ship, the Swarm Mother felt disturbances in the collective mind. Entire patrol groups had gone silent, their mental connections simply ending without warning or pain. The Swarm Mother was ancient by any standard, having lived for over 3 centuries. She had guided her species through countless wars and expansions. But this was different. When Vexhi died in battle, the hive mind felt their death throes. When they died from disease or accident, there was often warning. These disappearances felt like parts of her mind simply being cut away with a knife. She sent stronger patrols to investigate, groups of 50 or more warriors accompanied by command drones. 2 of these patrols had already vanished. Now she was considering sending a full war swarm to find answers. Dr. Yilandra of the Altarian Science Council read the reports with growing alarm. Unlike the military commanders and political leaders, she remembered humans in detail. She had studied them for 10 years before their enslavement, fascinated by their complex psychology and cultural patterns. Yilandra's species looked almost exactly like humans, except for their pale blue skin and silver eyes. This similarity had made her particularly interested in Earth's dominant species. She had written papers on human adaptability, their talent for long-term planning, and their unusual capacity to maintain hatred across generations. She requested a meeting with the Consortium Council, the governing body that included representatives from all 12 member species. The council met in a massive space station that orbited no star, positioned at the gravitational center of Consortium space. The council chamber was designed to accommodate all species comfortably. Zephyrians stood in formation near crystalline energy columns. Thalorians took root in specially prepared soil beds. Vexhi drones clustered around their queen representative. 9 other species filled their own sections of the vast room. Yilandra stood at the center podium, her voice carrying clearly through the translation systems. Honored counselors, I believe the recent disappearances are not random events. The Wank pattern suggests coordinated action by an organized force. High Counselor Zekthar's branches rustled dismissively. Dr. Yilandra, we have investigated these incidents thoroughly. There is no evidence of any coordinated threat. That is precisely my concern, Yilandra replied. Whatever is causing these disappearances leaves no evidence behind. This suggests advanced technology and careful planning. Admiral Crix activated his communication device. Doctor, are you suggesting another consortium member is responsible? Internal conflict would explain the advanced technology. No, Admiral. I believe we face an external threat, one that knows our capabilities and has prepared countermeasures. The Vexhi Queen representative spoke through her translation device, her voice buzzing with insectoid harmonics. External threat implies unknown species. All species in this galaxy are catalogued. Consortium sensors monitor all inhabited systems. Yilandra took a deep breath. What about the humans? The council chamber fell silent. Several species had representatives who began talking at once, their voices mixing into chaos before order was restored. Zekthar spoke first. The humans were defeated 20 years ago. Their world is under consortium control. Their military was destroyed. Not all of them, Yilandra said quietly. The ship called Prometheus escaped before Earth's surrender. Consortium records claim it was destroyed, but no wreckage was ever found. Admiral Crix's skin had turned almost black. One ship cannot threaten the entire consortium. Even if it survived, it carried only 10,000 humans. 10,000 humans with 20 years to prepare, Yilandra replied. I studied their species extensively. Humans are exceptional at asymmetric warfare. They excel at using limited resources to achieve strategic objectives, and they have cultural concepts that some of our species lack. Such as? Ask the representative from the gas giant dwelling Nephil. Revenge. Humans can maintain hatred for decades or even centuries. They pass it down through generations like genetic memory, and they have another trait that our psychological profiles often overlook. Yilandra activated her own display, showing detailed charts of human behavior patterns. Humans become more dangerous when they are desperate. Other species surrender when facing impossible odds. Humans fight harder. They develop new tactics, new technologies, new strategies. 20 years of exile would not weaken them. It would make them stronger. The council erupted in arguments. Most representatives dismissed her theory as impossible. How could a single ship of refugees threaten an empire that controlled hundreds of star systems? But Admiral Crix was studying the disappearance patterns more carefully. He had military experience that the politicians lacked. The missing ships formed a rough sphere around Earth's location in space. They were all isolated targets, picked off one by one with surgical precision. Doctor, Crix said, his voice cutting through the arguments, if you are correct, what would you recommend? Yilandra's silver eyes reflected the chamber's lights. Immediate reinforcement of all border patrols. enhanced sensor networks in previously secure areas, and most importantly, improved communication with Earth's surface. If humans are returning, their enslaved population might be preparing to assist them. The council debated for hours. Most members refused to believe that defeated humans could pose any real threat. They had other concerns, other priorities. The economy was growing, trade was profitable, and member species were content with their positions in the consortium. As the meeting ended with no decisive action, Yolandra returned to her private research station. She began compiling everything known about human military history, their technological capabilities before the conquest, and their psychological profiles. 3 days later, a consortium battleship was found drifting in space. Its crew of 300 had vanished without a trace. But unlike previous disappearances, this ship carried a message burned into its hull with focused energy weapons. The message was written in the human language called English. Yolandra translated it for the panicking council. Earth remembers. Admiral Crick stared at the translation with growing dread. He had fought in the conquest of Earth 20 years ago. He remembered the desperate courage of human defenders, their refusal to surrender even when facing impossible odds. He had assumed that conquering their world would break their spirit. Now he began to wonder if they had made a terrible mistake. Maybe they should have destroyed humanity completely, rather than enslaving them. Because if the humans were truly returning, they would remember every injustice, every cruelty, every death. And humans, as Dr. Yolandra had warned, were very good at holding grudges. The ghost ships continued to hunt in the darkness between stars. And somewhere in the void, humanity was coming home, as Captain Marcus Chen walked through the engineering decks of New Olympus, humanity's greatest secret. The massive mobile city stretched for kilometers in every direction, hidden in the dark space between galaxies where no consortium sensor could detect it. Marcus had aged 20 years since leaving Earth, but his eyes still burned with the same determination that had driven him to evacuate 10,000 humans from their dying world. Gray streaked his black hair now, and lines mapped the stress of 2 decades spent planning humanity's return. Status report, he requested from his aide, Lieutenant Sarah Kim. Construction Bay 7 completed the last batch of Wraith-class ships yesterday, Kim replied, consulting her tablet. That brings our total fleet to 437 vessels, all specialized for specific target species. Marcus nodded, watching through the massive viewports as sleek warships moved through the construction yards. Each ship looked different, because each had a different purpose. Humanity had spent 20 years studying their enemies, learning every weakness, every blind spot, every psychological pressure point. The Prometheus hadn't been a refugee ship. That was the lie they had told the consortium, the final deception before humanity's defeat. The real Prometheus had carried Earth's greatest minds, scientists, engineers, military strategists, and industrialists. They had also brought the most advanced human technology, hidden in components that looked like life support systems and agricultural equipment. Take me to the intelligence center, Marcus ordered. They walked through corridors filled with humans from dozens of different nations and cultures. The crew of New Olympus included people who had never seen Earth's surface, children born among the stars who knew their home world only from stories and recordings. But they all shared one thing: the memory of what the consortium had done to humanity. The intelligence center buzzed with activity. Massive screens displayed star charts, ship movements, and communication intercepts from across consortium space. Dr. Helen Rodriguez, the center's director, approached Marcus with a satisfied smile. Captain, Phase 1 is complete. The consortium is now isolated and paranoid. Their member species are beginning to suspect each other of the attacks. Marcus studied the main display, showing red marks where human ships had struck consortium targets. Over 200 successful operations without a single loss. Each attack had been planned for months, executed with surgical precision, and completed without leaving evidence. Show me the Zephyrian analysis, Marcus requested. A new display activated, showing detailed schematics of Zephyrian ships and energy systems. Dr. Rodriguez highlighted key weaknesses that human scientists had discovered through careful study of captured technology. Zephyrian energy systems depend on crystalline matrices that resonate at specific frequencies, she explained. We've developed disruption fields that can destabilize their power cores from a distance. Their ships will be completely defenseless. Marcus moved to the next display. And the Thalorians? Their hyperspace navigation systems use biological computers grown from their own neural tissue. We've created a virus that attacks these systems specifically. It will spread through their entire trade network within hours of deployment. The third display showed Vex-Hi hive ships and their complex command structures. The insects are the most challenging target, Dr. Rodriguez admitted. Their hive mind makes them nearly immune to conventional psychological warfare. But we've found their weakness. She activated a recording of Vex-Hi communications intercepts. The buzzing clicking sounds meant nothing to most humans, but the analysis computers had decoded their true meaning. The Vex-Hi hive mind depends on quantum entanglement between individual drones. We've developed a jamming system that breaks these connections. Individual Vex-Hi become confused and helpless when separated from the collective. Marcus nodded, approvingly. Humanity had learned from their defeat. The consortium's greatest strength was the cooperation between member species. But it was also their greatest weakness. Each species had evolved differently, developed different technologies, different ways of thinking. This diversity made them powerful when united, but also made them vulnerable to targeted attacks. What about our human assets on Earth? Marcus asked. Dr. Rodriguez's expression became grim. Underground networks have been growing for years. The resistance movements are ready to act when we give the signal, but the cost will be high. The consortium will not give up Earth without a fight. Marcus had agonized over this decision for months. Liberating Earth would mean war, and war would mean human deaths. Millions of his people lived as slaves on the planet surface, working in alien factories and mines. Any uprising would lead to brutal retaliation. But slavery was a slow death. Every day the consortium remained in control. Humanity lost more of itself. Children grew up speaking alien languages, learning alien values, forgetting what it meant to be human. Earth's culture was being erased piece by piece. "Show me the Liberation Fleet," Marcus ordered. They moved to another section of the intelligence center, where the main screen displayed New Olympus's most closely guarded secret. Surrounding the city were not just the 400 ships that Lieutenant Kim had reported. Hidden in stealth fields and sensor-dampening clouds were over 2,000 vessels of every size and class. Humanity had built more than a navy. They had built an armada. Each battle group is commanded by officers who fought in Earth's defense 20 years ago, Dr. Rodriguez explained. They know their enemies personally. They've studied consortium tactics and developed countermeasures for everything. Marcus recognized many of the command ships. The UES Defiance, captained by Elena Vasquez's former wingman. The UES Retribution, commanded by the last survivor of the Geneva garrison. The UES Justice, led by a woman whose entire family had died in Vex-Hi detention camps. These weren't just military officers. They were survivors carrying 20 years of rage and carefully planned revenge. Casualties? Marcus asked quietly. Computer models predict 70% chance of success with acceptable losses. But sir, we're not just fighting the consortium military. We're fighting 12 different species with 12 different technologies and strategies. Some of them will fight harder than others. Marcus studied the tactical displays. The plan was incredibly complex, requiring simultaneous attacks across dozens of star systems. Everything had to work perfectly, or humanity would face extinction instead of liberation. The key is speed, Dr. Rodriguez continued. We hit every major consortium position at once. Their command structure breaks down, communication becomes impossible, and member species start making individual decisions instead of coordinated ones. She highlighted specific targets on the star map. Zephyrian energy stations, Thalorian trade hubs, Vex-Hi hive shipyards. We cripple their ability to work together, then offer them individual peace terms. Marcus frowned. Peace terms? Sir, we've also spent 20 years studying human history. Every successful revolution eventually faces the question of what comes after victory. We can't rule a galactic empire through force alone. We need the other species to choose cooperation over conquest. This was the part of the plan that kept Marcus awake at night. Destroying the consortium would be difficult but achievable. Building something better in its place would be humanity's greatest challenge. He moved to the final display, showing Earth itself. The blue marble hung in space exactly as he remembered it, but satellite imagery revealed the changes. Alien structures dotted every continent, massive mining operations scarred formerly beautiful landscapes. Cities had been rebuilt according to consortium efficiency standards rather than human aesthetic values. Home, he whispered. Sir, Lieutenant Kim said softly. Incoming message from the Deep Reconnaissance Fleet. Marcus activated his communication device. The voice that emerged belonged to Commander Torres, one of his most trusted officers. "Captain, we've completed surveys of all target systems. Enemy patrols are following predictable patterns. Defense stations are operating at minimal alert status. The consortium still doesn't believe we exist." Marcus smiled grimly. The consortium's arrogance was humanity's greatest advantage. They saw themselves as the natural rulers of the galaxy, too powerful to face serious threats. They had grown comfortable in their dominance, lazy in their security. "Begin Phase 2, Marcus ordered. Signal all battle groups. Operation Homecoming starts in 72 hours. Throughout New Olympus, alarms began sounding. Not warning alarms, but preparation signals. For 20 years, every human in the Hidden Fleet had trained for this moment. Now it was time to see if their preparation was enough. Marcus returned to his private quarters and stood before a small shrine. It contained photographs of Earth before the conquest, images of cities and landscapes that no longer existed. But it also held something else, a list of names. Every human who had died in consortium captivity. Every resistance fighter executed by Vex High enforcers. Every child who had grown up as a slave. Marcus had memorized them all, carrying their memory like a sacred burden. Soon, very soon, humanity would have its answer. The consortium had taught them that might makes right, that the strong naturally rule the weak. But they had made one crucial mistake. They had assumed that weakness was permanent. In 72 hours they would learn otherwise. The first attack came without warning. Admiral Crix was reviewing patrol reports when his flagship's lights flickered and died. Emergency power kicked in seconds later, but by then it was too late. The human fleet had already appeared around his position. Crix stared at the main display in shock. 12 human ships surrounded his battle group, their black hulls almost invisible against the stars. They moved with perfect coordination, their weapons already charging for firing solutions. "Shields up. All weapons target the lead vessel," Crix ordered. His crew responded instantly, but their energy weapons wouldn't activate. The Zephyrian ships, crystalline power cores hummed frantically trying to build charge, but some kind of interference field was disrupting their energy matrices. "Sir, all primary systems are failing," his tactical officer reported. "The power cores are destabilizing." Crix felt fear for the first time in decades. Zephyrian technology was the most advanced in the galaxy. Their energy weapons could destroy planets. Their shields could stop asteroid impacts. But now his flagship was helpless, floating dead in space while human ships closed in like predators. A communication channel opened. The voice that spoke was calm, professional, and absolutely terrifying in its certainty. "Admiral Crix of the Zephyrian 4th Fleet. This is Captain Sarah Kim of the United Earth ship Retribution. You have two choices: surrender your ships and cruise immediately, or be destroyed where you float." Crix's silver skin had turned completely black. "You cannot defeat the entire consortium. Even if you destroy my fleet, others will come." "Admiral," the human voice replied, "look at your tactical display." Crix activated his long-range sensors and felt his heart stop. Across Zephyrian space, every major fleet position showed the same thing. Human ships appearing from nowhere surrounding consortium vessels demanding surrender. His entire species' military was being neutralized simultaneously. "How is this possible?" Crix whispered. 20 years of preparation." Captain Kim answered. "You taught us that might makes right. Today we are the mighty." Similar scenes played out across the galaxy. In Thalorian space, High Counselor Zekthar watched in horror as his trade empire collapsed. Human ships had seized every major hyperspace junction, cutting off communication and transportation between Thalorian worlds. But worse than the military defeat was what happened to their biological computers. The virus that Dr. Rodriguez had designed spread through Thalorian systems like wildfire. Within hours, their entire navigation network was corrupted, their ships lost, and unable to find their way home. Zekthar stood in his command center as reports poured in from across his territory. Fleet commanders requesting orders but unable to receive replies. Trade convoys stranded in hyperspace. Colonial governors declaring independence as communication with the central government failed. "Counselor," his aide Veltar approached nervously. "We're receiving a transmission from the human fleet." The main screen activated, showing a human officer with graying hair and determined eyes. Captain Marcus Chen looked exactly like the records from 20 years ago, but his expression had changed. There was no mercy in those eyes now. "High Counselor, Zekthar." This is Captain Marcus Chen of the United Earthship Prometheus. Your government enslaved my people for 2 decades. Today, we offer you the same choice you once gave us: surrender and serve, or face extinction. Zekthar's branches rustled with rage. Humans are a primitive species. You cannot defeat the consortium. We already have, Marcus replied calmly. Your fleets are disabled, your communications are down, and your trade network has collapsed. But we're not here for revenge. We're here for justice. The Vex Hive faced the most personal attack. Their hive mind had always been their greatest strength, allowing millions of drones to work as one perfectly coordinated organism. But human jamming devices broke those quantum connections, leaving individual Vex Hive confused and terrified. The swarm mother felt her consciousness fragmenting as pieces of her collective mind simply disappeared. Entire hive ships went silent as their crews lost contact with the central intelligence. For the first time in 3 centuries, she experienced something that Vex Hive had no name for: loneliness. Human ships surrounded her primary hive vessel, their weapons trained on critical systems, but they didn't fire. Instead, they transmitted a message directly into the fractured hive mind. Swarm Mother of the Vex Hive Primary Hive. This is Commander Elena Vasquez of the United Earthship Justice. We know you can still hear this. Your hive is broken, your drones are scattered, your children are afraid. But we offer you something your species has never received: mercy. The Swarm Mother struggled to respond through the chaos in her mind. Individual Vex Hive voices screamed in confusion as they experienced independent thought for the first time in their lives. What do you want? She managed to transmit. The same thing we wanted 20 years ago, Elena replied. Freedom. But we've learned that freedom means nothing if it comes through oppression. We're prepared to restore your hive mind, but only if you agree to our terms. Across the galaxy, the consortium's member species faced the same impossible situation. Human forces had appeared everywhere at once, their attacks perfectly coordinated and surgically precise. Each species found their greatest strength turned against them through human ingenuity and preparation. The Nephil, who lived in gas giant atmospheres, discovered that human ships could survive in their crushing environments using technology stolen and improved over decades. The crystalline Valdari found that humans had developed sonic weapons that shattered their bodies at specific frequencies. The shape-shifting Morphic encountered human forces that could track them through dimensional analysis regardless of what form they took. But the most shocking thing was that the humans weren't trying to exterminate anyone. Every attack came with an offer of surrender, every victory with terms for peace. The humans fought like demons but negotiated like diplomats. Dr. Yolandra watched the collapse from her research station, feeling a mixture of vindication and terror. She had warned the consortium that humans were dangerous, but even she hadn't imagined they could coordinate something this massive. Her communication system activated, showing Captain Marcus Chen's face. She had studied human psychology for years, but seeing this man's expression taught her something new about their species. Dr. Yolandra of the Altarian Science Council. You were the only one who understood what we were capable of. We respect that intelligence. Captain Chen, Yolandra replied carefully. What are your intentions toward the consortium species? Marcus was quiet for a moment as if considering his words carefully. Doctor, humanity has learned some hard lessons about power and responsibility. We could destroy every ship, kill every leader, turn your worlds into ashes. But what would that make us? The victors, Yolandra answered honestly. The monsters, Marcus corrected. We've seen what happens when strength is used without wisdom. The consortium ruled through fear and oppression for centuries. We could do the same, but we choose not to. On Earth, the liberation had begun. Human resistance fighters emerged from hiding as consortium forces found themselves cut off from support. The Vex Hive garrison troops, separated from their hive mind, surrendered without fighting. Zephyrian administrators fled to their ships, only to find them powerless. Thalorian overseers discovered that their escape routes had been blocked, but the humans didn't massacre their former oppressors. Instead, they herded them into detention camps and began broadcasting a message across the planet. Elena Vasquez's voice carried across every communication channel. People of Earth, this is Commander Elena Vasquez of the Earth Liberation Fleet. We have returned. The consortium's rule is ended. But our fight is not for revenge. It is for justice. Today, we reclaim not just our freedom, but our humanity. The Consortium Council met in emergency session, but half their members couldn't reach the station. Those who did arrive found human ships waiting for them. Captain Marcus Chen himself came aboard, walking through corridors where human slaves had once scrubbed floors. The council chamber was chaos. Representatives from 12 species shouted accusations at each other, their alliance crumbling under pressure. Some blamed the Zephyrians for weak defenses. Others accused the Thalorians of poor intelligence. The Vex High representative sat silent, still struggling with individual consciousness. Marcus entered the chamber and the arguing stopped. He walked to the center podium, the same place where Dr. Ylandra had tried to warn them of humanity's threat. Representatives of the Galactic Consortium, Marcus said, his voice carrying clearly through the translation systems. Your empire is finished. Your fleets are defeated, your worlds are blockaded, your people are demanding new leadership. But we didn't come here to rule you. High Counselor Zekthar's branches bristled. Then what do you want? Marcus activated a holographic display showing a document written in multiple languages. We want you to sign the Terran Accords, a new treaty that establishes rules for interstellar civilization based on equality rather than domination. The assembled aliens stared at the document in confusion. After such a complete military victory, they had expected demands for tribute, submission, or execution. Instead, the humans were offering them a chance to negotiate. Elena Vasquez stood in the rebuilt Geneva Assembly Hall, looking out at representatives from across the galaxy. The same chamber where Earth's leaders had once signed their surrender now hosted humanity's final judgment on their former oppressors. 5 years had passed since the Consortium's defeat. Earth's cities had been rebuilt, its people freed, its culture restored. But the real test wasn't in liberation, it was in what humanity chose to do with their victory. The assembly hall buzzed, with nervous energy. Representatives from all 12 former Consortium species sat in carefully arranged sections, their translators working overtime to handle the complex negotiations. Armed human guards stood at every entrance, but their weapons remained holstered. The threat was clear but unspoken. Humanity could end any species' existence with a single command. Elena walked to the central podium, her uniform bearing the insignia of the Terran Federation. She was no longer just a military commander. She had become Earth's primary representative to the galactic community. Representatives of the galactic community, Elena began, her voice carrying across the chamber. We gather today to finalize the Terran Accords and establish the framework for our shared future. Admiral Crick sat with the Zephyrian delegation, his silver skin pale with anxiety. The past 5 years had been a constant negotiation between survival and pride. His entire species' energy technology had been surpassed by human innovations. Their once mighty fleets now served as cargo vessels under human oversight. But they were alive, fed, housed, allowed to maintain their culture and government. The humans had kept their promise of mercy, even when many Zephyrians had expected execution. High Counselor Zekthar represented the Thalorians, though his authority had been greatly reduced. The tree-like alien's branches had grown grayer over the years, reflecting the stress of watching his trade empire become a regulated economy under human supervision. The Thalorians had fought the hardest against the New Order. 3 rebellions in 5 years, each crushed quickly but without massacre. The humans seemed determined to prove that strength didn't require cruelty. The Vex High delegation was perhaps the most changed. The Swarm Mother had agreed to maintain individual consciousness among her drones, creating a hybrid collective that could think independently while still sharing experiences. The change had been traumatic for their species, but it had also opened new possibilities for growth and creativity. Dr. Ylandra sat with the Altarian group, serving as their chief negotiator. She had become something of a celebrity among humans, the alien scientist who had understood their potential when others dismissed them. Her research on human psychology was now required reading in diplomatic schools across the galaxy. Before we proceed with the final vote, Elena continued, I want to address the question that I know troubles many of you. Why did humanity choose mercy over revenge? The chamber fell silent. This was the question that had haunted interstellar politics for 5 years. Why hadn't the humans simply exterminated their former oppressors? Why build a complex system of rehabilitation and reintegration instead of ruling through fear? Elena activated a holographic display showing images from Earth's history. Battles, conquests, empires rising and falling. My species has a long and bloody history of warfare. We've enslaved each other, committed genocide against our own kind, built empires on suffering and oppression. She changed the display to show the ruins of ancient civilizations. But we've also learned from our mistakes. Every empire built on oppression eventually collapses. Every system based on fear eventually breeds rebellion. If we had chosen to rule you through terror, how long would our victory have lasted? Admiral Crix raised his hand to speak. Commander Vasquez, many of my people still wonder if this mercy is simply a more sophisticated form of control. Elena nodded thoughtfully. Admiral, that's a fair question. Let me answer with facts rather than words. The display changed to show economic and social data from across former consortium. Space. Production levels, population growth, technological advancement, cultural development. The numbers told a clear story. Under the consortium, member species were locked into rigid roles. Zephyrians provided energy, Thalorians controlled trade, Vexhi enforced order. Innovation was discouraged because it threatened established hierarchies. She highlighted specific examples. In the past 5 years, Zephyrian scientists have developed 3 new forms of clean energy that surpass their old technology. Thalorian artists have created entirely new forms of literature now that they're free to explore individual expression. Vexhi philosophers have written works that would have been impossible under the old collective consciousness. Dr. Yilandra stood to speak. Commander Vasquez, you're suggesting that oppression limited not just our freedom but our potential. Exactly, Elena replied. The consortium created artificial scarcity to maintain control. Species were kept dependent on each other, prevented from developing their full capabilities. Breaking those chains didn't just free you from human rule, it freed you from the limitations the consortium imposed. She changed the display again, showing images of mixed species colonies and research stations. But the real proof of our intentions is this. We're not keeping the fruits of liberation for ourselves. The images showed Zephyrian human engineering teams developing new technologies, Thalorian human cultural exchanges creating hybrid art forms, Vexhi human scientific collaborations producing breakthroughs in collective intelligence research. High Counselor Zekthar's branches rustled skeptically. Yet humans maintain final authority over all military forces and interstellar law enforcement. Elena's expression grew serious. Counselor, that's true, but consider why. In the past 5 years, how many species have tried to restart military expansion? How many have attempted to recreate the old consortium power structures? The chamber was uncomfortably quiet. Everyone knew the answer. 7 different species had attempted military buildup in secret. 4 had tried to establish new slave colonies on primitive worlds. 2 had planned coordinated attacks on human positions. All had been stopped quickly and with minimal violence. Their leaders arrested and their populations given better alternative leadership. We maintain military authority because some of you haven't yet learned the lesson we're trying to teach, Elena said bluntly. Power without wisdom leads to oppression. Until every species in this galaxy understands that fundamental truth, humans will serve as guardians. She activated her final display, showing a document that would reshape galactic civilization. The Terran Accords, refined through 5 years of negotiation and testing. This document establishes 3 fundamental principles for interstellar civilization. First, no species may be enslaved or oppressed by another. Second, all species have the right to develop their full potential without interference. Third, conflicts between species must be resolved through negotiation rather than warfare. Elena looked around the chamber, meeting the eyes of representatives from across the galaxy. But the Accords also include something else, a graduation clause. Admiral Crix leaned forward. Graduation? When a species demonstrates consistent adherence to these principles for 10 consecutive years, they gain full autonomy. Their worlds are removed from human oversight. Their military forces are returned to their control. They become equal partners, rather than supervised populations. The implications hit the chamber like a physical force. Humanity's rule wasn't permanent. It was a test, a chance for each species to prove they could handle freedom responsibly. The Zephyrians are already in their 7th year, Elena continued. The Altarians are in their 6th. Even the Vexhi, despite the difficulty of their transformation, are in their 4th year. Dr. Yilandra stood again. And the species that fail this test? Elena's expression didn't change. They remain under supervision until they pass, however long that takes. The threat was clear but not cruel. Species that couldn't learn to coexist peacefully would be protected from themselves and others. But they would also be given every opportunity to grow and change. Now, Elena said, we come to the final vote. Each species must choose whether to sign the Terran Accords and join the new galactic community, or reject them and face isolation. One by one, the species representatives approached the signing table. The Altarians signed first, Dr. Yolandra adding her name with visible relief. The Zephyrians followed, Admiral Crix's signature shaking slightly as he committed his people to a future they couldn't fully control. The Vexhi delegation took longer, the Swarm Mother consulting with her advisors in the clicking, buzzing language that humans had learned to understand. Finally, she approached the table and signed, her claws carefully forming the symbols that would bind her species to the new order. High Counselor Zekthar was the last to sign. His branches trembled as he lifted the writing implement, years of pride and authority warring with the reality of his species' situation. "Counselor," Elena said quietly, "this isn't surrender. It's a chance to build something better." Zekthar looked up at her, his ancient eyes reflecting decades of galactic politics. "Commander, I have spent my entire life believing that the strong naturally rule the weak. You have proven that strength and wisdom are not the same thing.